Wanted to do a nice little flat earth video. I've got a nice collection brewing of different things that I've found in writings throughout time that kind of guide towards the questioning of the structure of the earth and what we've been told. And you know, everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody knows, and that's the thing that really gets me, is when people get really excited one way or the other. And it's like, you know, we don't know. Until we do know, everything is a possibility. And everything is there, and we have to take what we learn and what we've gained in the knowledge that we can access and try to deduce from it. And the people that are just basically taking and regurgitating what they're being fed are all in one field, and the people that are really diving deeper and finding the truths and questioning the normal things that everyone else is accepting willy-nilly are actually kind of going a little bit further and proving it, and they're developing methods and experiments that help prove it. And so I want to add to that with a book that I found called, and I'll include the link below, I forget what year it's made, but it's called Chart and Compass, Sextant and Sundial, Latitudes and Longitudes, Plumb Line and Pendulum, Globe or Plane. A letter of remonstrance, respectfully addressed to the officers of the Naval and Mercantile Marine of England and America, the former styling herself Mistress of the Seas, it says on the cover. So I think this is a very interesting kind of writing, and it's again, you know, that's where we can find a lot of the things from the military, from the architects, the people that actually utilize these different things, pilots, all these different things. And some can be hidden. You can hide the truth from some and kind of convince them that they're seeing something that isn't actually realistic, because it kind of does work in some way if you view it that way. But others see a lot of clues and they're like, that doesn't make sense, and then they dive deeper into it, and then they come to realizations. And the deeper you go back in history, the more obvious it is that things were flat and things were not a sphere. There's levels, everything. There's just hundreds of different proofs. And pretty soon a new book will be coming out, which I will share with you all, by one of my favorite flat earth authors that I actually had the privilege of drawing the cover for, is coming out soon. So stay tuned. I will release that information in a bit. But either way, I'm on a little flat earth kick, and I just had a conversation at the gallery about the flat earth where I was the crazy one and everyone else was kind of just, you know, reciting everything I already have been told and whatnot. And so I just wanted to get it out there. I like pushing it a little further because you all know what I'm talking about, even if the people I encounter in reality have no clue. So here we go. I wanted to read just one chapter from this book called Chart and Compass, which had a lot of information that I really liked, called A Letter. And it says, respectfully addressed to the officers of the Naval and Mercantile Marine of Great Britain and America. Here we go. Gentlemen, at a time when naval men and ship owners are beginning to inquire whether the science of navigation, with its collateral conditions, is not susceptible of some measurement of improvement, may we venture to draw your attention to the undeniable fact that they are still using a projection or chart of the world which was invented 3 centuries ago. Again, keep that in mind, everybody out there today, now, and which has never been considered otherwise than a makeshift and retained only because there was no accurate knowledge of the ocean's surface or its configuration. But this ignorance is hardly creditable in the present condition of our commercial interests in the extent of our foreign and colonial traffic. And that paragraph just proves, you know, the world, you all can be educated in one direction, but the reality of things and the reality of capitalism and making money and commercialism makes us kind of have to go with the way things really are. So we can only get away with hiding it to a certain extent. If those whom it may concern are really in earnest when they propose to take into consideration any means that may be suggested for affording greater security in ocean traveling, and leave them less dependent on systems of navigation which may have been considered efficient for coasting purposes or before our colonial empire was so extensive as it is now, they will, I trust, be willing to admit that not merely the substantial construction of the vessels themselves should be practically considered, but ship owners and naval men generally should honestly and intelligently ascertain how far their existing charts and projections may be regarded as incapable of improvement or be practically relied on as affording the most accurate information as to distances and relative position of every principal spot on the navigable ocean. Without any reference to existing theories, may we venture to ask how many of our most experienced seamen and naval officers could say if they knew what was the actual difference between the northern and southern meridians of longitude? would they not be obliged to confess that they were navigating their ships on an artificial or purely conjectural system of hydrography, and that the training they had received had never taken into account the possibility of there being a more simple and far more rational method of navigation by a stricter adherence to demonstrable facts instead of to artificial rules and astronomical principles which can have no more analogy to terrestrial or water surfaces than there could be between the length of a ship's deck and the date of the owner's birth? And that is pretty much nailing it, just showing that the difference between education and how these people are taught in the reality of the situation is a lot different. Like nurses, how they're all taught to just and doctors, how they're taught to just follow orders, pump in, give this medication, give this chemical, no matter what the side effects. And they don't really think any further than that. It's really, it's a problem that exists in every aspect of our reality. If their system was as correct as it professes to be, ought not a fully trained and perfectly educated officer be able to take a ship, say, to Malta and back on second or third voyage? Instead of which, when his theoretical education is over, he has to put his theories in his sea chest and learn from actual observation for many long years how to take a vessel, say, to the Cape of Good Hope without finding himself some foggy morning on the coast of Mexico. We are afraid these remarks will be received with much disfavor and be resented as an insult to the services they are humbly intended to serve. That's because that's how the powers that be do it, and that's how they work, by conspiracy labeling. But we are sure the issues are too serious to admit of any palliation, even in spite of the undeniable fact that thousands of vessels every year find their way out and home again with the most infallible accuracy. But is this any justification for retaining a system which has to be supplemented with the most voluminous tables and practically ignored by every experienced sailor? We are merely insisting on the fact that a comparatively perfect projection is as easy of construction and 1,000 times more intelligible than one which makes a burlesque of the whole subject, and is as unlike what it is intended to represent as if concocted by a village schoolboy. Whether the earth be a globe or a plane, a square chart with its rectangular meridians cannot possibly represent its natural divisions, or define its relative distances, or give the true position of its several continents, or the actual bearing of any spot out of sight of the crow's nest. Any accuracy of the detail is utterly impossible under such theoretical conditions. Surely no one will venture to say that this unnecessary and inexcusable defect in one of the most essential elements of practical navigation is not a slur on two great maritime nations like England and America. How dare you insult England and America? They are the top dogs who are the epitome of evolution. That's me adding. If other countries are no wiser, is that any reason why we should persist in setting such an example of barbarous ignorance? Our Admiralty and Boards of Trade are, unfortunately, regarded as oracular on all subjects relating to seamanship and naval science. We are therefore the more inexcusable for encouraging others to retain what we dare not defend in our own principles. Yikes. We are ashamed to have to insist that the proper construction of our charts of the habitable world is as easily determined and the distances as accurately laid down and the latitudes and longitudes as mathematically infallible as would be the plan of an estate of a few hundred acres. And yet in this professedly most enlightened age, we are still using a square chart, with every figure and line of it wrong, and as unlike the real earth and its waters as the ingenuity of man could conceive. Is not such ignorance as pitiable in our case as when the Ninevites were said not to know their right hand from their left? The distances on Mercator's chart are computed on the arc measurement, when no such shape as a curve can anywhere be found. So there are not 90 degrees north or south of the equator, but only 57.5 degrees, barely 45 degrees of which are practically navigable. Meridians of longitude cannot possibly be parallel, but must be divergent from the central north to the southern circumference. Mercator's straight edge is as preposterous as a south polar center. I love these guys who are writing this. But without pursuing the subject further, we are quite prepared to show that the topography of the circular plane on which we live admits of exactly the same infallible accuracy as the compilation of the multiplication table. By using the present imperfect and most misleading projections, ships must inevitably wander hundreds of miles out of their direct courses, while time and money and valuable cargoes are often risked, merely because the authorities at home think they would forfeit a certain amount of prestige by abandoning their time-honored fallacies. If the Royal Geographical Societies of England, Scotland, and Ireland cannot give you better instructions on what grounds, it may be asked, do these scientific associations venture to collect incomes of £6,000 or £8,000 a year each and obtain royal charters for diffusing imposture and fraud in fiction? Now let us make a few practical remarks on the quadrant and sundial. From models or specimens now to be seen in the British Museum, we learn that the quadrant was known and used so early as the end of the 14th century, or several hundred years before sailors ever dreamed they were sailing on the surface of a spherical ocean. I wonder why. The inventor therefore never contemplated its employment otherwise than on a horizontal base, at right angles to the sun's vertical rays or to the perpendicular of any other distant object, and it can by no possibility give a true elevation if used on any other conditions. If these absolute conditions are not practically complied with, the observers would have 3/4 of their time occupied in making allowance for curvature, which it is well known they are never insane enough to think of. Again, all observers are supposed to be on one and the same horizontal base, so that a greater angle than 90 degrees is never contemplated or provided for or obtainable in any survey that can be made. Every Arctic explorer knows that in the latitude, say, of Bering Straits or Hudson's Bay, an observation of the sun can be made at midnight looking due north, which would be physically impossible if a large segment of a circle intervened between the observer and the June solstice looking over the north quote-unquote pole. How discreditable it is to two such maritime nations as England and America, to say nothing of the other European governments, that such gross and wholly inexcusable ignorance on some of the most important points in the most elementary conditions in navigations should still prevail. Again, we do not believe that there is one nautical man in 10,000 who knows, nautical man in 10,000, that knows the true cause of the compass needles pointing north and south, Mount Meru. Unless our naval instructors are no wiser themselves, their sole object seems to be to allow our seamen and officers to be mere machines, and like the children of landsmen, to be unacquainted with the most rudimentary principles and conditions of practical science. An exposure inevitably will take place someday, and the professors will then learn a lesson from their ill-instructed dupes they are not likely to forget. Same with the pilots. The English press, both secular and religious, is unfortunately in the hands of those who are as ignorant of the genuine facts of science as the most thoughtless of their readers, and to hide their shameful incapacity, they toady, like brainless sycophants, to the professional authorities who, like abject cowards, allow these half-witted journalists to display their wisdom by burking all open discussion and publishing their vulgar smears when any honest inquirer ventures to refer to the subject. Yeah, the same method has been going on for a long time. We could fill many pages with the description of the manifold fallacies in connection with some of the most familiar objects around us. You got that right. Phenomena and facts are daily taking place before our eyes, while we go on year after year and age after age, as ignorant of their true character as if no such things had ever been seen. Even men of the most undoubted intelligence have, for example, gone on for the last 150 years using a ship's quadrant and never pausing to inquire or to perceive that the instrument was utterly incapable of being accommodated to the conditions they supposed to exist. Another instrument quite as familiar as that of the quadrant or sextant is the sundial. It is the very oldest philosophical instrument ever used or invented by man, and for more than 5,000 years it was used in all its simplicity and perfection of principle, that is on the motionless disk of a stationary earth with a revolving sun to mark the shadows in its daily progress, or circular orbit from its rising to its setting. Checkmate. But for the last 200 years, a set of crafty and fraudulent and absolute piece of infidel professors have dared to assure their dupes that the sextant and the sundial could be as easily used on a round and revolving globe as on a circular and motionless plane. And in the ignorance and credulity of our childhood, we have been led to accept as genuine truth some of the most degrading and senseless superstitions ever devised by the arch-fiend himself, in order to persuade mankind that they were wiser than God and had far sounder views of his creation. That is a 100% right on the dot, and I've been saying that for years. This entire flat earth, the big difference, and this is what nobody gets, and it's what I tell everybody when they're like, why does it matter? it matters because one group of people is telling you you're an insignificant nothing as a dot in space, in a vast empty space of infinite, huge, vast massiveness where you mean absolutely nothing. There is no God and nothing matters. The other one is like, there's a firmament. This was all potentially created. This sun and moon and earth combo is actually an engineered creation. Who created it? Who's the gods? There is definitely people greater than us. That's what all of this leads to. And that's the massive difference. And these people just nailed it in that last paragraph. I love that. We have scores of other facts, quite as palpable and important, but we forbear and only ask our readers to weigh well what we have already stated. Mr. Jordan of 81 Spring Street, Hull, will send a lithographed sketch of the true and false application of the sextant, which he was the first to detect. The inutility of a sundial on a revolving globe will be apparent at a glance, when it is remembered that a body rotating on an axis in one uniform plane before a fixed sun must cast a straight shadow, cast east and west of any upright staff, placed anywhere or in any latitude between the solstices. So, does it do so? Why not? Is it hardly credible that millions of intelligent men have used these two instruments during the last 2 centuries without detecting the glaring absurdity of adapting them to the conditions of a round and revolving globe? And yet the very professors who have the most fraudulently hidden these facts from us have been year after year pocketing their enormous revenues while leaving us to believe that all that science could reveal was honestly and instantly proclaimed for the benefit of those who have so unreservedly trusted them. And so far from exhibiting the commonest courtesy towards those who with every mark of respect sought to discuss the matter with them, they have either refused to see them or have given them plainly to understand that no unprofessional assistance could be entertained for a moment. Yep, the same thing. The secretary of the Zetetics Society will gladly furnish any further particulars on application. We have left ourselves no room to refer at any length to the plumb line and pendulum. We have had, however, many opportunities of proving that they are both of them as fatal to the globular theory as any of the other instruments we have mentioned. The plumb line has never been shown to deviate a hair's breadth from a true perpendicular to any horizontal base. And as for the pendulum, its vagaries have as much consistency as a weathercock, so that literally every possible test to which ingenuity can appeal, all of them, without one solitary exception, utterly refute the globular theory and fully establish the truth of the motionless plane, which the most learned and godly men maintained and taught for the first 5,000 years. The most learned and godly men maintained and taught for the first 5,000 years. So anytime anyone out there questions you, because they will question all of us, and they do constantly, just remember that. We are within the group of the most learned and godly men thinking this stuff because we dare stretch the boundaries of thought beyond what they restrain us in. And the pagan blasphemy now insisted on in all our secular and religious literature has not the very ghost of a fact on which to rely. Pythagoras, its original inventor, openly asserted that he had spent 6 months in hell, and even if he had not told us so, we should know that there is but one source from whence such a system of lies and imposture and blasphemy could have emanated. 6 months in hell, he said. I wonder who is behind that. Has it got one defender except among the very scum of the literary world? God's bitterest curse must rest on any country and people enslaved by such heathen superstition. And in spite of all the extravagant and senseless ecstasy now being displayed on the occasion of Her Majesty's Jubilee, we should have thought that after a 50 years' slavery to such pernicious fallacies and such worse than heathen ignorance on the most elementary subjects, we might have hoped that this year would have been characterized by some less childish and sensuous transports than those we are giving way to. And no matter what year this book was written, the same exact things are still going. They still joke about the hollow earth, tinfoil hat, conspiracy theorist heads who doubt NASA and the cult of science. They consider us to be the worst and just absolutely pathetic. And every time they try to bash us, they end up looking stupider and more foolish. And every time they really try to put it out there, it's so easily disproven that it just clinches our suspicions even more every time without fail. They just cannot hide it. What's so obvious once you take all of these fallacies into consideration? It's like, you know, you hear one or two and you're like, you know, you never really know, but, you know, the programming still kind of is very strong. But you keep going and you hear hundreds of these proofs, and you see the science and you see the experiments and you see how the mainstream hides them and how it demonizes them, and you know exactly the source. Like they said, Pythagoras spent 6 months in hell. Were they training him? Were they telling him exactly what he needed to do? Were they guiding them and basically setting the stones in motion? Did they already have this plan ahead of time, hundreds of years prior to this? This communist, atheist, godless, like beast of science, were they planning this globular thing attack for a very long time? And if the world had known its flat plane and miracle plane for 5,000 plus years, all the ancient religions, the Jains, everyone talks about it, 6 billion miles wide, 6 billion miles high, or some variation of. If they had known for so long, and there was a force that is now taken over, the one that we see every day of our lives, that's just pure evil and godless and filth, how long were these evil people just working and battering to get this to become a reality, to get science to take over from logic and common sense and religion, and to get all these people to penetrate these science, to even penetrate the religions, so that people will forget what their ancient books tell them and just trust the cult of science, which overrides all of this with absolute lunacy, so that the worst people on earth can profit and we can all suffer by thinking that the world is way less cool than it really is. Because that's what it's all about. One view is very God-based, the other one has none. And it stinks because a lot of God-fearing and God-believing people believe in the globular theory. And then you tell them about level and, you know, oh, the water is flat, and, you know, give me a microcosmic proof that water can stick to a ball. And they're like, you're so silly. It's blah, blah, blah. And they spout this stuff that makes no sense. It's nuts. All of you know what I'm talking about. We've been in it for so long. I was in a round of it today, and I came out on top, as I always do in those considerations, because, you know, just making people think, just making people, even if they think you're crazy, you get into them when they hear these certain things and they connect them. When you bombard them with 30 different reasons why they should question it, they do. Even if they're fighting it on the outside, it's getting to them. So keep red pilling, keep telling people, show them the way. The beautiful people of the past, the people that could not be fooled, all think like us. The people that can be fooled, the sheep, the followers, the ones that are just kind of wasting their time and just kind of not experiencing everything that the potential of the universe has for them. We feel bad for them. We hope to guide them to this reality because it's so much better, and time will do that. It will work. Things are going in the right direction, and we just got to keep it up. So keep spreading the word. Bless you all. And again, stay tuned. I've got a Flat Earth announcement coming soon. And there's a hint in this video. I won't even go into it, but stay tuned. It's going to be awesome. Good stuff coming this year. Bless you all.